My guest today is co-founder and CEO of Ivy Clinicians, which is a platform to find your next emergency medicine job. It is free for users and a really innovative way to level the playing field for finding jobs, and certainly can be expanded to other specialties beyond emergency medicine. Dr. Leon Adelman is an emergency physician. He was medical director at Tennova Healthcare Clarksville and Johnston Health UNC. He's led emergency department teams to exceptional patient-centered outcomes. He served on the board of directors at Virginia and North Carolina Colleges of Emergency Physicians, where he created the Leadership and Advocacy Fellowship. He's a graduate of Brown University, the University of North Carolina School of Medicine, the Harvard-affiliated emergency medicine residency at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, and Haslam College of Business Physician Executive MBA. Leon is also married to an ER nurse and has two adorable dogs. Today's conversation is hopeful. There are some really hard moments of talking about challenges in emergency medicine and the House of Medicine. Leon has so many innovative ideas and potential solutions. You won't want to miss today's episode because you are going to leave more inspired and have some ideas on what you can do and how you can work collectively with other organizations to get us where we need to be. Thanks for listening and enjoy today's episode. Welcome to Heartline, conversations with healthcare changemakers following their Heartline. I'm your host, Dr. Andrea Austin. I'm an emergency medicine physician, coach, and educator. I believe that healthcare needs to improve the quality care that patients receive, and that supporting the workers is at the heart of this transformation. I am thrilled to have on the podcast Dr. Leon Adelman. He is the founder of Ivy Clinicians and a practicing emergency physician. And this season of Revitalizing Healthcare is all about change makers. And Leon is right up with some of the most innovative, interesting people that I've had a chance to talk with. So Leon, welcome to the podcast.
Well, Andrea, it's an honor to be here, and thanks for the compliment. It means a lot.
We like to start the podcast with, who is Leon Adelman? Tell us your story about where you grew up, what do you do, and how you ended up becoming the founder of Ivy Clinicians.
Starting with a big question. I like it. So I grew up kind of as a nomad. So my mom always saw the grass greener on the other side. So we moved pretty much every year when I was growing up. That kind of fits with the emergency medicine mindset where I always have to be ready for the next thing, whatever comes your way. I went to the University of North Carolina School of Medicine and then trained at Beth Israel up in Boston, and really was on a path to being a kind of EM administrator type person. So assistant director for a few years, then medical director of two emergency departments, and then found my way to entrepreneurship. And glad to talk in a lot more detail about why entrepreneurship and why the change. But I do have to say, leading emergency departments, being a medical director, was definitely the hardest job I've ever done. So mad respect to the medical directors out there.
All right. Well, let's actually spend a little bit of time on that. You just opened the door. So of course I'm going to go through it. So you became a medical director, and then your career took a turn towards this entrepreneur route. What happened there?
It's two directions. There's the push and the pull. The main change that happened made me not want to stay in the kind of EM admin role is the closing off of sequential partnership opportunities. So I was in really the best group I've ever been in, called Emergency Medicine Associates. They were in Northern Virginia and in Maryland and Washington, D.C. Really great group. And they, or the senior partners, sold the practice to a private equity company. And very quickly became obvious that the company, the group that we really loved before that was no longer. And so I chose to leave that group and took a job with another physician-owned group where I was a partner, shareholder, medical director. And again, it was really what I was looking for, very happy with that. And then the hospital system went with a private equity-backed group, American Physician Partners, which underbid contracts. That's part of why they're bankrupt now. So they took all of the contracts in our state for that health system. And so I, as the medical director, really did want to stay during that transition from a great group to American Physician Partners, and then came to North Carolina. The group that I was with didn't have a partnership track. So I started looking, so that was the push. I started to look like, hey, what else is out there? Then there's the pull, which is I went into kind of health tech entrepreneurship and specifically creating Ivy Clinicians. The reason that I saw this opportunity was it's one of these things where I realized I had been saying for years and years, somebody should build a platform online that makes it really easy to figure out who staffs which ER, which ones are good, which ones aren't so good, how much do they pay, which ones offer partnership, and who do I contact within those groups so that when I'm navigating the emergency medicine job market, either as a doctor or as a medical director trying to hire doctors, that there's one place where all this stuff can happen. And I was watching the nursing startup software world really blow up during the pandemic. So if you've done night shifts since the start of the pandemic, you've probably seen the nurses on their phones kind of scrolling through the next job opportunity on one of the apps, whether it's Aya or Vivian or Matchwell or Incredible. There are many, many staffing tech companies that have raised collectively over $1 billion of venture capital money to help nurses find better and higher paying jobs. And it really has transformed the nursing industry. And so I started saying, hey, where's ours? Where's the doctor Matchwell? Where's the doctor Incredible Health? Where's the doctor Nomad? There really isn't much technology to help physicians navigate the job market. And so it was really an opportunity to jump into creating something that I thought would help the physician job market.
So listening to your story, I'm just struck by how similar, what happened to you with being at a physician-owned group, having private equity come in, underbid, and then take over, and then the group changes really negatively. I've had many friends go through this process. I've come very close to it. We had a very close call at a place that I've worked during my career. And I'm having a hard time finding words because what can we do? I mean, this just seems to be, the David and Goliath story, that how do we stop these corporate medical groups from destroying our specialty? And unfortunately, some of the responses that you hear is the train has left the station and there's really no going back. What's your response to that?
It's a massive question, and it's a question that is so important, not just to us, but also to patients and really to our society, that it's made it all the way to the Senate. So the Senate is investigating the financialization of emergency medicine and medical practices more generally. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Department of Justice are both looking into consolidation and corporatization in emergency medicine, but they've also sued Welsh Carson, which was the private equity firm that originally formed U.S. Acute Care Solutions. They sued them in the context of U.S. Anesthesia Partners. So there's a lot of action in this space trying to figure out, hey, something seems to have gone wrong here. A lot of doctors are really unhappy with their practices. Patients are unhappy with how those medical practices are going. So now what, right? So it's clear that something needs to be done. The most kind of drastic now what would be to find a way to make medical practices like law practices, right? So the American Bar Association does not allow lawyers to sell their law practices to non-lawyers. Not only that, as a law firm, you can't even share revenue with a non-lawyer. Lawyers can hire non-lawyers like paralegals and consultants and stuff to work for them, but they can't share revenue. So basically, the American Bar Association says law firms are owned by lawyers, period, end of sentence. What that means is that it is not illegal, or it'd be like kind of crazy to imagine that lawyers who make these rules and live under these rules would somehow say, oh, it's legal for us to do this as the American Bar Association, but not legal for you to do this as the American Medical Association or American College of Emergency Physicians or ABEM, or whichever group kind of spearheads this within the House of Medicine or the House of Emergency Medicine. So there is a legal avenue towards kind of putting this genie back in the bottle, if you will. There's a few steps that if the House of Emergency Medicine doesn't want to take that route, what can individual or small groups of physicians do to bring ownership back to emergency medicine? And weirdly enough, one answer is unionization. Why do I say that? What does unionization have to do with ownership? Because by definition, union members are employees, right? They cannot be the owner. The owner is the other side of the table from a union. The reason I say that is you could imagine a union forming, or I guess we can use the actual example of the union in Detroit at Ascension St. John's. They formed a union that has already gone on a one-day strike. That union is a massive annoyance to Ascension. If you're the CEO of that hospital, I would have to imagine that CEO wants to do anything possible to rid that hospital of the union. Well, the only way to rid Ascension St. John of that union is to make, or to guarantee that they rid Ascension St. John of that union, is to make all of the doctors in that group owners. And so if you're the owner of that group, if Michelle Weiner, who leads that union, becomes an owner of the group along with everybody else in that group, all of a sudden the union dissolves because you can't unionize against yourself. And the CEO of Ascension St. John's gets to breathe a sigh of relief and say, I don't have to deal with those unions. I'd much rather deal with a physician group.
That is so fascinating. And I think a beautiful example of the power of us looking outside the House of Medicine. Because I find that doctors, and I love doctors since I am one, that we reinvent so many wheels. And my theory is because our medical training was in some way so narrow, medicine is a very narrow field. You know, when I look back, if I had to design a medical school curriculum, it definitely would have had some business in it. It definitely would have had some finance in it. So we end up not understanding what, for instance, this was fascinating that lawyers are like, oh, absolutely not. We would not invite corporate overlords to take over our practices. That would be a terrible idea. So if the lawyers think it's a terrible idea and they're involved in writing a lot of legislation and policies and procedures in places, maybe we should take a page out of their book.
Exactly.
I would say one call to action for the listeners, and this has been, in some ways the school of hard knocks and a painful thing I've had to learn, is because I love doctors so much, I often choose in my spare time to spend time with doctors or to spend time with, even specialty organizations, which I 100% want people to be involved in their specialty organization, whether that's ASAP, AEM, I don't care, be involved. But I also would ask, get involved in some community groups that have non-doctors. It's fascinating how some of the problems I've ran into lately, throwing it past an accountant or an attorney, it's even in side conversation, not somebody who I'm necessarily paying, but just things that come up when you're, out and about, have opened my mind. What's your reaction to that, or how is that translated in your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, it's such a good point. It's such a good point. So we become experts, or we have become experts in the practice of medicine, and we put so much energy and time, and it's so meaningful, and we really become great at this one thing. But when you think about the job market, we really have to look beyond the books that we all read. And so one of the things that I've tried to do with Ivy is look at other job markets that have figured something out and put that into practice through the startup. What I mean by that is, which job markets seem to be working the best in the United States? So one, software engineers. So when you Google, most satisfied career, number one job, software developers are usually number one on that list. Why is that? One of the reasons is that there's a really liquid job market and really transparent job market for software engineers. So there are multiple websites that'll tell you exactly how much Microsoft is paying for a certain level of job, and how that translates to Google, and how that translates to Netflix. And so that's step one. Step two is that there's the expectation of job switching, which does two things. One is it keeps employers on their toes, to the point where if you are an employer, so say you're Microsoft and Google is treating their employees better than you are, you're going to lose your employees, because there is a cultural understanding that it is okay. It is actually beneficial to the whole ecosystem that you change jobs every few years. So what does that mean? That means if Google does something well for their employees, Microsoft has to then do that. And then Netflix does it. And then Amazon does it. And so there's a race to the top for how they can treat their best employees. There's also the benefit to the end users of their products and services, right? So the United States creates some of the best software in the world, right? So, well, why is that? Why, if these engineers are so coddled, why are they putting out such great stuff? And the answer is the competition leads them to compete with each other just as much as they are forcing competition for the employer. So a liquid, transparent job market is really good for both sides. And that was not the case, or is still not the case really, in medicine or in emergency medicine. On the transparency side, it was very hard to figure out who even staffed which ER and how much they were paying and who's good and who's bad. We at Ivy are really trying to bring that transparency and ease of job switching to emergency medicine.
I love that. So tell us more about Ivy. Like, how does it work? So somebody probably listening is like, well, I don't know, maybe my job's not the best one that it could be, and I really would like to have more information. How do they interface with Ivy?
The base layer of Ivy is what Zillow is for houses. We have every emergency department on the site. If you search by city or by zip code or by name of hospital or by state, you'll see all of the emergency departments in that region that you search for. And then it'll feel very familiar on the left side. There's thumbnails of every ER, kind of like the houses would be on Zillow. On the right side, there's the map. And then when you click into a site, you see, instead of bedrooms and bathrooms, it's whether it's a trauma center, whether they're residents, whether it's critical access, descriptions of the group, what the EMR is, all the information that you would want to have. And then if you want to apply directly through Ivy, we've connected our platform with the Federation of State Medical Boards. All of your credentialing information is already there. You upload your CV, and we have contact information for all of the in-house recruiters in the country. So the in-house recruiters for all 5,700 emergency departments. So you can send an application directly to that in-house recruiter, all for free.
Wow. I mean, that sounds like a no-brainer for everyone. And especially, I'm imagining We've got we certainly have graduating people. Hopefully they all have jobs, but before we know it, it's time for that next class to start applying. So it seems like this would be a really good service for them to sign up for.
I'm obviously biased, but I couldn't agree more.
And is there any fee? So like if I wanted to hop on and create a profile, is there any charge to me?
The fees are on the other side of the platform. So to post a job, there's two layers. There's the base layer, which is being on the platform and being able to find the site on the platform. So I currently work at Wilson Medical Center in Wilson, North Carolina. Wilson Medical Center, which is staffed by Team Health, will always be there. It will always be findable. You can always apply. But if Team Health wants to post a job saying, oh, we are paying X number of dollars for this particular job for emergency physicians, board certified only, whatever it is they want to put up there, we charge market rates to the employer to put job posts.
Awesome. So I want to move to an issue that I know is near and dear to both of our hearts. And I think, my hypothesis is this is part of why you created Ivy is, it breaks my heart that EM continues to top the burnout charts. You want to be number one in a lot of things. Burnout is not one of them. And, I'm a resident educator. I interact with residents all the time, and I'm very active in our college. And I want to recruit the best people to this field. And in some ways, I think it is a beautiful profession. At the same time, I really struggle, and I'm very transparent with learners about this. I don't want to recruit people into a field in which they will be mistreated. And I have an ethical issue if we are recruiting young, smart, and bright people into a field that is going to chew them up and spit them out the other side. And worse than that, potentially not even acknowledge that they've done that. So gaslight them. Mm-hmm. And then two, destroy them even further through, if they do end up with depression or whatever, that they destroy their medical license or their ability to get employed in other ways. And that, unfortunately, is a dark picture, but that is a very real version of what happens to some of our colleagues. I know that was a very heavy thing that I just laid on you. What role does Ivy have in maybe starting to break that cycle? And it's going to take a lot to answer the burnout question, but what's your response to that?
Yeah, great question. And I think you've described the burning platform that emergency medicine is on very well, that we have a very strong group of physicians, but for some reason, or for reasons that we'll talk about, the job's just not working for them. And so, Ivy's small piece of the puzzle is giving people options. So you are not trapped in your job. If you are a board certified emergency physician, or if you're an emergency physician in general, there are 5,700 emergency departments in this country. And if you don't like where you are right now, there are other options for you. And Ivy makes that easy. But there's a bigger picture here, which is, burnout among emergency physicians honestly doesn't make any sense, right? We went through medical school, which we were not getting paid. We were the opposite. We were paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for the honor of working 80, 100 hours a week and not knowing anything and feeling like we were killing every patient we interacted with. And then we went through internship and residency, and we were paid $12 an hour to work our butts off, nights, weekends, holidays, everything. And that should lead to burnout, right? That's the hard part. How can working 36 hours a week and getting enough time off and having more control over the schedule, how can that be anywhere near as burnout inducing as med school and residency was? And the answer is our working conditions really have been degraded to the point where many or most emergency physicians feel like they are not able to deliver the care to their patients that they went through medical school and residency to do. And so they feel this, moral injury that they've done all this stuff. They go to work every day with the mission, the purpose, the goal, the sacrifice of years of their life for this thing to deliver excellent patient care to acutely ill and injured patients. And because of the system around them, they can't do that. And so now the question is, okay, so the ER's not working for the doctors, which means it's not working for the patients. What do we do now? And my sense is there are a few big ticket items that we would need, few wins that we would need to restore emergency departments in the United States to places that can provide better care. One is, if you go into any emergency department that I've worked in over the last few years, for sure, from what I hear from others, I don't think that the areas I'm working at are special. There are always 5, 10, 15 psych patients lingering in that emergency department, taking up beds that should be space for acutely ill and injured patients. But those patients aren't getting good care. The new patients are in the waiting room. Why are they there? And so big ticket item number one would be to find a better place for those mental health patients once they've been stabilized. There are great models for this, like the Empath unit led by Scott Zeller, started in Alameda County and now is being ramped up across the country. It's already been profiled in the New Yorker and won multiple awards. There is no reason that we can't scale. We as a specialty can't be behind the scaling of Empath units. The other is that we should not accept that the emergency department is an okay place to park medical admissions. Right? So hospitals bill at the same level for their medical admissions if they are boarding in the hallway of an ER or they're upstairs being treated by a full complement of staff, of hospitalists and nurses and the team upstairs. There's a financial incentive for hospitals, especially for-profit hospitals, to decrease their staffing of medical and psychiatric nurses because it is more profitable to just sort of pack all those patients into ERs for as long as they can be there. And we as a specialty, we, the House of Emergency Medicine, really should be standing up to those hospitals to stop that abusive practice of understaffing nurses and using the ER as a place for admissions.
Wow. I mean, my husband and I love to say this phrase to each other sometimes, like, you just said the quiet part out loud.
Subtlety is not my strength.
I love that. And I think the altruism of physicians, that we thought we were just going to go to medical school and we were going to take care of patients and it was going to be great. Now I understand pragmatically that I can't be blind. I used to always be like, I don't want to know about the money. That is like so slimy, ewy. Like, I keep my white hat by not knowing about the money. And now I'm like, no, I actually need to understand this better to keep my white hat.
Mm-hmm.
Some heavy stuff. All right. So how much do we actually understand about what emergency physicians think about their working conditions? I talk with my friends all the time. I feel like I have a pretty good pulse on things. And if you looked at the memes that we send, that's a study I'd like to see. The memes that ER doctors send each other about how their shift's going. That would say a lot. What do we actually know? What's the literature, the data show?
So we do have outcomes or some outcome-related data which shows that there's a massive problem within the emergency medicine physician job market. So one data point is that there's a Yale study of Medicare data that shows that female emergency physicians leave the profession at an age 12 years younger on average than male emergency physician. So that is a red light siren for the specialties. For some reason, this specialty is not working for female emergency physicians, which is about half of the specialty. Then there's the subjective data that comes from Medscape and others about burnout, where for the last several years, emergency physicians have said that they are more unhappy than with their jobs than other specialties by a wide margin. OBGYN was the second most burnt out or unsatisfied specialty. And there was an over 10% difference between emergency medicine and OBGYN. And it's not just physicians. So the physician assistants, the biggest survey of physician assistants by specialty also shows that physician assistants in emergency medicine have the lowest job satisfaction in emergency medicine compared to any other specialty in the house of medicine. So this is a specialty level issue on the outcome side. So then the question is, okay, if we are going to solve for this, we need to figure out what it is that's causing this job dissatisfaction. What elements are there? Is it the nights and weekends, or is it the lack of practice ownership? Is it there isn't maternity leave and benefits for families? Or is it that there's something happening on shift that makes people unhappy? We just don't know. There is not good survey level data on why it is emergency physicians are so unhappy. We just know that they're very dissatisfied with their jobs. I think it is super important for some entity, whether it's an academic entity or ACEP or another organization, to do such a survey.
100%. I agree. We're mind-blind. Certainly, there's a lot of information out there, and, a lot of personal stories, which are very powerful about what's happening. I think it's all of the above. And we also need to know, you and I started this conversation off saying the physician-owned group was kind of the epitome in what, you and I both hope can happen more. I will also attest to, as somebody who has worked in a physician-owned group, that does not mean that it will all be roses. Some of the worst behavior I've seen in our specialty occurred at a physician-owned group. It was bullying. It was an unfair promotion track. So I think having better data on what is actually happening, of course, my hypothesis is the worst behavior will be among the CMGs, but we actually need to know. And maybe not all CMGs are the same. I would argue they're probably not. And we need to know that.
Couldn't agree more. There's no reason why a CMG, I don't really like the term because it's not clear what that means, but there's no reason a large practice of emergency medicine can't be the best practice for physician satisfaction, right? And so that's why it's so important to actually get this data. I think an example of an entity where the employees or the workers really took this onto themselves was the NFL Players Association. The thing that sparked what I'm about to talk about was that the players' families at a lot of teams felt like they were not being treated well during the games, and that there was a big variance between teams in how they treated players' families. And so what the NFL Players Association decided to do was set up a survey where they surveyed all NFL players and then use that data in an open way. And once a year, they lay out the results of the survey and they grade teams from A+ to F- on the elements that those players think are important, whether it's the training facilities or, again, how they treat the families or how coaches treat the players. They set their priorities. They put the questions. They set up questions based on those priorities. They collected And in this survey, about 75% of players submitted the survey, and then they put it out not just to themselves or to the league, they put it out publicly. So you could look up how the Arizona Cardinals did compared to the Chicago Bears. And you know what? Teams, when they get a bad score on a certain things, that's really embarrassing to a team that is paying people hundreds of millions of dollars to play a sport, and they make changes. And so I couldn't agree with you more that having the information is step one, and it is not preordained who's going to do well and who's not going to do well. And then sharing that information in a way that can lead to action and improvement on behalf of employers will make a big impact.
Yeah, what I want to get to is that has some overlay, or it's somewhat similar to the well-being index. Right now is something you have to pay for. That's a Mayo product. But I do want to have, like you're saying, open, available, transparent information that both physicians, physician assistants, whoever's working in the emergency department, and patients can see. Because you know what? I don't like going to businesses that I sense the employees are being treated badly. I had a very bad experience on an airline. I will not say their name. It was a very bad experience. And the flight attendant it was very bad what happened. It was actually as I was flying back from deployment. And I sat in my seat and I was like, I can't believe she just did that. And I was at first upset at her. And then I sat there for a minute and I said, for her to have done that, she must be being so badly treated by her company to have just did what she did. Because a person that's being treated well would have never acted like that. And there's another airline, which I will say their name, Southwest. Sometimes they get a lot of bad publicity. They had a bad year with their tech. But every time I call Southwest, they are so awesome. They have amazing customer service. And that goes to culture. And it goes to how they're treated. So some of my friends make fun of me when I fly Southwest because they're like, oh, it's so weird how you have to line up in the seats. And I'm like, on shorter flights, I choose Southwest because I can sense that the employees are treated well. And the second I get a bad vibe on that, I'm out. And I think that's what we need to start doing. We need to share this information, not just with each other. We need to start sharing it with our patients.
Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more, right? Medicine is such a personal vocation, right? So our relationship with our patients is really special, and patients know that. And so when they have choice, they will go to a setting where their physician has the time to spend with them and is supported. No question, we should incentivize patients with the right amount of information to choose a well-supported group of physicians.
Is there anything else you would like our listeners to know?
Yeah, I think that in this period when I think we in emergency medicine can agree that things as a specialty are not as we want them to be, I think the most inspiring response to that is, who better to deal with adversity, to deal with challenges, to deal with things that are not working, to deal with something that many have tried to fix, but those who came before us could not fix it. Well, we're the MacGyver specialty. We're the new kids on the block. We're the folks who, anyone, anytime, anything, we're the ones that can solve problems. And so we have been dealt this hand where our employment models kind of messed up, our hospital models are kind of messed up. There are all these regulatory and financial problems that we face. But if anybody is going to figure this out and turn this specialty around, it's us. It's emergency physician.
I love that message. And that really dovetails nicely with a prior episode I recorded with Christina Shenby. And it gets into the coaching mindset. I went through an embarrassing long time in the pandemic, screaming into the void, hoping that somebody was going to come rescue us. And I am convinced that no one is going to come rescue us. I'm also convinced that there are a lot of entities that are willing to come help us, but we have to be able to tell our story and to be clear on what we want.
Could not agree more. Nobody's coming to rescue us, but that doesn't mean we can't lead the charge and create change.
I love that message. So, Leon, how can our listeners interact with you? How can they sign up for Ivy?
Yeah, so we're at ivyclinicians.io or just Google Ivy Clinicians. I am Leon Adelman. You can find me on LinkedIn. My email address is leon@ivyclinicians.io. And happy to receive any ideas or feedback for Ivy Clinicians or the Emergency Medicine Workforce newsletter, which I put out every few weeks.
Amazing. And rapid questions here. Give me one conference that you've attended that's not an EM conference that has expanded your network and changed your perspective on something.
So I'm going to cheat and make it a vaguely emergency medicine conference because it's so good. The Mediterranean Conference of Emergency Medicine, which is always in a spectacular place. It was in Rhodes, Greece this year. Is just an amazing conference to meet folks from outside the United States and learn from their experiences.
All right, awesome. I'll give that one to you. Thanks, Leon. This has been really fun having you on the podcast, and I can't wait to have you on again. And are you going to ASAP, Scientific Assembly in Las Vegas?
I will be there.
Wow, bunch of ER docs in Vegas. What could go wrong or right?
Best 3 days of residency was when ASAP was in Las Vegas, my senior year of residency. So,
oh, cool.
ER docs in Vegas is a good time.
I was a fourth-year medical student that had a poster accepted. So I also remember that conference. So yes, I'm very excited. I just want to thank you for all that you're doing, the service that you're providing to our specialty, the vision, and doing something creatively. I've also been in the entrepreneurial space, and it is vulnerability, it is learning a lot, and it is tough. And I thank you for what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate it. That means a lot.
Thanks, Leon. Thanks for listening to Heartline, conversations with healthcare changemakers following their heartlines. I'd so appreciate it if you could take a quick moment and hit the like button and also the subscribe button that you'll find within your podcast app or platform that you're listening on. It also really helps if you can leave a review. I would certainly appreciate a 5-star review and a few comments about what you liked about this podcast. Don't forget, you can also forward this to people in your network. People love getting new podcasts and changing up what they're listening to. So sending a podcast to a friend or colleague, or even to start a conversation about a change that needs to happen in your organization, is a great way to be a change maker. This podcast represents the views of the host and guests. It does not represent the views of any entity we work for or with. It is also for informational use only and does not replace any professional advice, including medical or psychological. If you are interested in unlocking your true potential, reach out to me. If you're an organization interested in supporting the well-being of your people, I'd love to connect on innovative solutions. Schedule a strategy session at andreaaustinmd.com. Sound editing services are provided by Better Podcasting Services, and you can find their website at betterpodcastingservices.com. And I'd also like to thank our future Dr. Caitlin Din, who is the production assistant for this podcast.